nerds. This is CNN Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Polk. How are you doing tonight, Will?
Doing very well, Sarah. How are you doing?
Extremely frustrated.
Yeah, it's been a lot going on lately. Extremely.
My microphone, I think, has crapped out on me. I think it is just dead.
No, I can hear you. You're still with us.
Will, my mic is not plugged in anymore.
Is it a wireless mic? This is the sausage being made. Lindsay, we're usually more professional than this. Well, you've been with us before.
It's all good.
I understand. My mic is no longer. And Lindsay's here, too, to join us, because we're going to talk Game of Thrones, maybe.
Hello, everyone. My mic isn't plugged in either, but I don't use one, so.
It's let me down, and I'm so angry right now. Oh, man.
Is this like a metaphor for how people have felt about Game of Thrones this year?
It just might be. Is your microphone covered in salt, perhaps?
Mine?
Yeah, that would be a good reflection of how people feel about Game of Thrones this season.
See, I don't even get that reference right now because I'm so preoccupied and frustrated. I'm just not there for it. But Will, what are you talking about? You don't even watch the show. How can you comment on it?
Well, I've watched it vicariously through you guys, and I've watched it through Twitter. I mean, I don't need to watch it. Between Leslie Jones, I could find out everything I need to know.
So not true. Oh, man.
You ended up getting the best viewing experience then, Will. Congratulations.
Well, since Will already led us here, so I guess we're going to start off with it. Lindsay, what did you think about the Game of Thrones series finale?
I was miserable the entire time.
Why?
I just did not live up to any of my expectations, and I had very low expectations coming into it. I guess if the best way I could preface it is I don't mind the conclusions it came to. I just feel like the way we arrived at those conclusions was very forced and very rushed.
Yeah. So that's it for Game of Thrones talk.
Well, thanks for having me, guys.
I'm still upset about my microphone.
Let it go.
It's looking at me right now. It is looking at me and saying, Sarah, you spent this amount of money on me and I'm just not going to work when you were really looking forward to talking tonight and we're already late. And it's just, I can't let it go,
You can let it go.
Oh my God. I felt fine about the finale.
Okay.
I'm probably more lenient than other viewers. There is no good way to end a series. I've just figured that out. We can blame so many different things on what happened and speculate and everything, but this is what the writers and these showrunners decided to do. I listened to Collider Live before we got on and before my microphone died. And I think Christian Harloff is right that it gets to a point with these shows, the larger the audience, the more likely you will never be able to write something that does not offend anyone.
Oh, absolutely. You
and that's
your own weight.
Right. That's the part that's really starting to even get under my skin because I'm sorry. I far love Jon Snow over Daenerys. He was in a place of a do or die, kill or be killed, and for once he made the self-protection like the no, I have to survive, I have too much to lose, and so he killed her. And it was the right thing to do because she was seriously going the Hitler route, okay?
The First Order, the New Order from Star Wars. That's what I was reminded of. And she was doing that speech with the black and red flag.
Yeah. I mean, the girl's got style, but very little substance now.
I have no qualms about Jon having to kill Dany, but the way Dany turned into, quote unquote, the Mad Queen was so rushed that it was unbelievable to me. I didn't feel convicted that she, in a snap, went mad. I thought that was very awkward. So I didn't have the emotional reaction because I was just in disbelief over
Right.
everything.
And I blame that more on season 7 than I do season 8. Because season 7 was a lot about bringing these two characters finally together, and Dani actually becoming part of the main Stark storyline, because for most of the series she was seriously on the other side of this earth, conquering and building her army, and it took a long time for her to actually become a true player of this game. And yet in season 7, albeit there's a year separating these two, it was rushed that suddenly they became allies, suddenly they became lovers, and then a year and a half later they also become, oh yeah, you're family, now you're both to the heirs to the throne, you're still lovers, one's a dictator, one doesn't want power at all, or so he says. So there was just a lot that, maybe if this was really a season 9, we wouldn't be feeling like, oh, that was so rushed.
Yeah, I agree entirely. You said earlier that you can't really blame anyone. I don't know about that. The showrunners, D&D, HBO had offered them 10 seasons with 10 episodes, and they went, maybe this is 7. So that to me tells me they were tired of working on this and wanted to move on quickly.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that point. That's a fair one to make that, but I can only imagine how exhausted everybody was on this show. And the second half of this episode proves how exhausted they were, because it wasn't the best. Really, from the production, even the production started to slip. Like A Song of Ice and Fire, here's a random prop that looks hideous, and we're gonna have this smart aleck pun against Tyrion that he's not even in it. Tyrion, actually, I don't know how you feel about this, Lindsay, because yes, he makes the decision that Bran is on the throne. However, I also find that he ultimately did win, because Tyrion is the hand of the king, and if this show has taught me anything, it's not the king who rules, it's really the hand who rules.
Right.
Because he advises the king. So Tyrion, in a way, did win, and Sansa won because she ended up on her own throne. It wasn't the one she initially wanted, but it was still a throne that she came to cherish overall with all of her experience. And I do really like that point, because if Sansa had gotten nothing, I would have been pissed.
No, I'm actually really content with Sansa's ending, especially considering what that character went through. She went from one tyrant to the other. And for her to end up with that kind of independence, I think that was well earned, especially her character arc going from like a spoiled little girl to what she is now. I think that was done well enough with the time they had with her. So that was fair. And with Tyrion, I think you're right about that. I think it's maybe a little more bittersweet. It's almost like his victory is his punishment. Because I don't think Tyrion wanted to be in a position to rule at that point. So like Jon, it's almost like his punishment as well. So.
He didn't want to be in that position at all, yet he spent an entire 2 minutes fixing all of the chairs around the table to make it presentable. No. I don't buy that. I think, I actually find that that's one of the bigger sins, that Tyrion left unscathed. Granted, there was a very powerful moment of him discovering Jaime and Cersei's bodies, which was also, how do I put it? A bit, I can't think right now. There's a word for it. Undermined by the fact that I thought that entire place should have just been made of bricks.
You know what? I actually went back and watched the previous episode, and that entire room collapsed. So I don't know what happened between this episode and that one. And the fact that they were just lightly dusted with a few bricks and not completely submerged, I'm not sure what to think about that. A little convenient that he wiped away 2 bricks and there they were suddenly.
Yes. Yeah. He is an imp after all. I mean, seriously, come on. But I thought, and I also found that the writing of this episode was very annoyingly written for Peter Dinklage. Like, he had some great moments, but towards that middle scene where they bring everybody together and everyone has to decide, well, how do we rule now? What do we do with Jon Snow after his betrayal? And the fact that he is kept prisoner and is allowed to give a monologue after Grey Worm tries to shut him up, and yet he still is allowed to in his cuffs. And I don't know about you, Lindsay, but I also was just fatigued at that time, because I'm like, this is not the first time in the series, nor the second, nor the third, where Tyrion has been able to give a monologue and talk his way out of imprisonment. This is not anything new.
Well, even going backwards just a little bit, why was Tyrion and Jon kept alive? Earlier in that same episode, Grey Worm and his soldiers, we were shown that they were not taking anyone prisoner. They were killing Lannisters in the streets. And so Jon presumably turns himself in, and he's not killed on the spot. Suddenly there's due process for Jon and Tyrion.
Yeah.
What happened? What happened there?
I don't know. Maybe they thought, well, if the dragon didn't kill Jon, there must have been a reason. I have no excuse for Tyrion, because he is a Lannister. Jon is not a Lannister. Jon is a Targaryen. So.
Well, you bring up a great point with Tyrion for like the third or fourth time in the series, giving a monologue in handcuffs. But even bafflingly, the lords just agree. There's no dissension. It's just a unanimous vote from all these people of different backgrounds, different ages. It's, it hurts. It hurts. I feel your pain. I feel your microphone pain. It hurts.
Well, the moment that they were like, oh, so who's your leader? And there was a long pause. I was like, oh my God, they are so doomed. These are the stupidest people. Like, I don't understand what's happening right now. Do they not want to be the first one to say aye? I mean, Sansa clearly wants it. What is holding her back? And I don't know. It was kind of really sad how, and that council thing, scene, I think, is really just one of the most awkwardly placed scenes. Yep. I mean, to go back to your point, it's like there's this big epic romance and betrayal and death, and the dragon not being able to kill Jon Snow because he's Targaryen, but and then he takes out all his fire on the throne itself, which I thought was beautiful.
I agree.
To daylight. Destruction, very like, oh, after the fact, time has passed, or has it passed? I don't know what's going on anymore.
Jon and Tyrion have beards, so we know time has passed, apparently.
It's just, it was awkward. Like, it was just, like, again, clearly people are exhausted, even the editors.
To me, this reeks of reverse engineering. D&D were told the ending by George R.R. Martin, and they reverse engineered from season 6 to this point now, the quickest way to get there. And that's why it's just so incredibly awkward.
You know, I was thinking about it before we got on, and before my microphone died, that I actually think season 6 might be my favorite season.
Wow. That's an interesting choice.
It is, and I know a lot of people right now are claiming the earlier seasons, but season 6, you got Jon comes back to life. You have Jon become King of the North. You have my absolute favorite episode of this entire series, the Door episode, which is big for Bronn, big for the history, the legacy of it all. You have the Battle of the Bastards.
Yes.
You have Sansa and Jon reunited. There's all of this payoff. And that's what I think was missing in this entire last season. There was a lot of closure and, all right, that's the end of this, but there wasn't necessarily payoff.
Absolutely. It was closure and it was not payoff. I was thinking earlier that if this season had at least maybe another episode, let's say it took place after this one, and it was maybe an epilogue, like a couple years later, and we can look into the lives of these characters and where it's left them, that maybe more satisfying conclusion to the season.
Yeah, it was funny. I heard a lot of people speculate that there is going to be a time jump at some point because it's the classic, most easy thing to do in these shows. And I was thinking about it, and I actually think that I prefer the way they did this more because, I mean, despite the crappy prop of it, they present the Song of Ice and Fire as this is the chapter of what happened after Robert's death and all of the wars that occurred as like an installment. Like, and that's why they left it so open-ended in a way. And I think it's actually a better ending is because part of the reason why so many of us, besides Will, love this show is that it felt like real life. And in real life, you don't just jump 10 years into the future and everything is fine. And you're also not teased with the like, oh no, they brought Danny back to life.
Yeah. Oh no, White Walkers in the snow in the distance. The returning.
It's just like, no, for what happened between this point in time, and we're going to tell you a story of just what happened between this point in time and this point in time.
Yeah, I agree. The fantasy aspect of the show, as enjoyable it is, it's actually the least interesting to me. I love the character development. I love the historical aspects or the references to real life stories like the War of the Roses, I believe, is a big influence on the books at least. And that's really where the heart of the show is. George R. R. Martin, a quote from him is, I don't think there's anything worth writing about more than the human heart in conflict with itself. If that sums up history, I don't know what does.
Yeah, and then you have a picture of Jon Snow right next to it, which honestly, another thing that people are overlooking is that Danny should have known that she was in for it because this is not the first time a lady has died in Jon Snow's arms that he loves. I mean, he didn't kill Yeager, but still.
Yeah, I guess Jon's not one to talk about his exes with current girlfriends, so she was unaware, unfortunately.
Yeah, he doesn't have the best streak.
Just going back to Danny, though, I can't get over how quick that scene went. This is going to hurt. And Tyrion moving the chairs was a longer scene than the time they spent with Danny dying.
Really?
Yes.
Did you time it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Because I'm like, because I thought that was long because the dragon comes in and the dragon is just screaming and crying and burning crap down. So I was like, come on.
Not counting the dragon, just Danny and Jon's time together and then her dying in his arms. I was just blown away that this major character from the very start of the show, his death is just done and over in less than a few minutes and then never brought up again for the rest of the episode.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jon does ask, did I do the right thing?
Right, we're left to deal with it through Jon's character, I suppose, his torment and having to deal with that decision he made.
Yeah. I kept thinking about how there was a line that I really did think that they used correctly to really tie in both Daenerys and Jon and Tyrion and Jon's scene, because I really like the first scene we get between Jon and Tyrion when he's locked up. Because that's where you start to hear this theme. You don't have the right to choose. Like, and they keep repeating that over and over again. And then he even asks Daenerys right before he makes up his mind, and she tells him like, well, I choose for them. and in that moment, she miscalculated because, girl, you don't tell somebody that when they're questioning your actions. What the heck, Daenerys?
Well, she was fully mad at that point, I guess is what the writers were trying to convey to us, that absolute power corrupts absolutely, and apparently it does so in one episode.
Well, I like to think of it more as sometimes you get lost in your own story that you're trying to tell yourself. You get lost in your own narrative, like, no, I am righteous. I am doing the right thing. I believe it, and there's 1,000 people over there who can kill you, who will tell you that I am right too. So who's to say that I'm wrong? Oh, somebody who I could kill with like one word and a dragon will burn them alive?
Yeah, you're right about that, because Tyrion and Varys touched on it, I think a few episodes ago, where they're saying anyone who believes that they're special and have destiny, that's never really ended well for that person or the people around them. You have to be a little touched to think you're destined to be some great savior. That doesn't come without violence, or at least in their perspective. I guess they were right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's man, it's weird. Like this finale, because I really do look at it in two halves. I look at the Daenerys conclusion and then the conclusion for everyone else.
Yeah, the first half of this episode was pretty much a longer part of the last episode. It might as well have been part of the last episode.
Yeah.
It felt very tacked on. They had to make that runtime. That's why Tyrion moved the chairs for 5 minutes, to fill in that runtime. Yeah,
there were probably a lot, or John walking up the steps. No need for that. Like,
yeah.
he what? Did he like cut his steps in half? Because Arya zipped up there.
Yeah, and he was talking to Grey Worm before he went up the stairs, and then when he goes up the stairs, Grey Worm's there waiting. So I guess he teleported.
Yeah.
I'm just sad. I'm sad that something so well written and so epic for so long had to come to such an awkward and forced conclusion because the showrunners got tired of the material and they didn't want to pass it off to anyone else, supposedly.
Well, I mean, so if they had made the decision to pass it off to someone else, are you sure that we wouldn't have gotten 3 more seasons, but it would have taken maybe forever for us to get to this point?
That's a good point. We'll never know. I just feel, I guess, as an artist with integrity, if you know you're not going to put your heart and soul into something, you might as well pass it on to someone and give them the opportunity. Might be better, might be worse, but at least, make that judgment call for the sake of the show. Yeah,
it's so, and maybe I'm just giving them an excuse, like it's so hard these days, but I've also seen shows where the showrunners, like, they pull a big Daenerys and they just believe they're everything they write is like genius, and it's like, no. No. You should have ended it back here, and you definitely should not have ended it there. Like, what the heck?
Yeah, you bless their hearts for sticking to their vision. That's their right. But yeah, unfortunately, with art, not everyone sees it the way you do.
Yeah.
And people will let you know.
So what did you think about John, at the end of all this? He's like done a big 360 and he still winds up at the Night Watch, but really he ends up rejoining the Wildlings.
Well, John finally pet ghosts. They could afford the CGI for that, so that makes everything worth it. But in all seriousness, I'm fine with John kind of circling back to where he started. But again, because it was so awkward, it's not emotionally satisfying. We didn't have enough time to spend with his thoughts on it. Tormund and him didn't have any dialogue. We don't know his aims as he leaves to the woods with the wildlings. We don't know. I guess they want us to have some kind of ambiguous nature to that, but I'm okay with that premise. I'm unsatisfied with how it arrived to that conclusion.
Yeah. I liked it when they first brought it up, and I was like, oh, cool, because I always do love a good circular story. And then it just kept going on. And there was really, and to your point, there was really no dialogue, and you're just like, no, I want a final moment. Like, I want something like, oh, that's really interesting. And I feel like maybe the writers did just get up and walk away, and they're like, let's just play music, the theme music over this part, and all will be forgiven. because it was kind of like, yeah, but what really is his thoughts on this? Like Kit Harington always plays the sad puppy dog eyes, so that's nothing new. But
Right, he's always brooding, so we know that. It doesn't tell us any new information. He's in permanent brooding mode. So it's
and
nothing.
he's always wanted to be there. Like that was his goal. We met him all the way back in season 1 on saying, no, I'm of age now. I'm going to go to the wall because I'm a bastard and I'm tired of this. So that was his goal.
There's so many loose ends because, as we know, he's Aegon Targaryen and he has the right to the throne. And what we saw last episode, Varys was sending letters to everyone sharing this news. People are going to be revolting. They're going to want him as king. But I guess it just doesn't matter at this point. The show's over. We'll never know.
Yeah. Well, we might know eventually. Who knows? I mean, that's what fan fiction's for.
Yeah.
I heard that laugh.
All right. Well, that's true. It's very true.
So Sarah, are you on board for any of the prequel shows that they're producing?
So, over the weekend, I did Google search information about the prequel show, and why not? Because there's a giant hole right now in my TV watching experience that I would like to fill. Now, if it's garbage, no.
Right, fair enough.
But they got Naomi Watts.
Oh, do they?
They do. That's what I learned. So if you can sign a movie star like that, I think maybe the writing won't be half bad to start with. Who knows what happens in 8 seasons?
Well, the last time they had a big movie star in the first season didn't end well for him, so.
It never ends well with him. That's why he's a big movie star, because he always dies in everything.
This is very true.
Okay. She at least has a much longer track record of surviving.
I did not know she was on board for that. That's interesting. Yeah, I'll look into it. I guess it just depends on how I feel about starting another HBO subscription whenever it releases.
Oh, I've given up on that. Like, I'm sold on HBO. I've been watching a lot of their documentaries recently. Big Little Lies season 2 is coming. All right. You got Euphoria with Zendaya. I'm really intrigued by that. I watched the preview for Westworld season 3. It actually does make me want to go watch Westworld season 2. So yeah, I'm pretty much like sold that my HBO has been worth it.
Oh, well, they definitely cherish you, because I'm pretty sure after last night, many people canceled their HBO subscriptions.
Yeah, but it's kind of just like what we're all doing right now. I get a subscription for one show, the show goes away, I cancel it, and then before I know it, Twitter is suddenly talking about nothing but this one show that's on HBO.
Yeah, that Chernobyl miniseries looks pretty interesting as well.
Yeah.
I've heard good things about the Chernobyl, and I've seen talk about people. Well, especially the first couple episodes, it definitely had some buzz. I haven't seen as much this week, but obviously it's probably just gotten drowned out by Thrones. But
right,
everything's gotten drowned out by Thrones. I mean, the last night was insane.
Oh, the memes! As bad as the season has been, it's been worth it for just the memes. The memes are incredible.
Well, I mean, it had to come to an end. We have our end.
Yeah. Do you feel that, as the non-watcher here, do you think that it was the weight of trying to put the season to bed and the story just collapsed under that? Or do you think people just like had their envision how they wanted the story to end, and because it didn't go the way they wanted it to go, then everybody's just like bitching and moaning about it? And I think your point about what Christian Harloff made, I think that's a very fair point too. But I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts on that.
If it did collapse, I think it collapsed 2 or 3 seasons ago when the showrunners decided they just weren't into it anymore.
I think that, like, Lindsay's right in her point to a degree. But I also do believe that because of social media, because the fact that we have a podcast, where we just dissect these shows and all we can do is think about the ways, well, if I was in that room, this is what I would do, or I really didn't like it when this happened. Like suddenly criticism has become morphed into this weird way for us to try to express our opinions about something that we have no control over. Like no matter what, like you can write any petition anytime and it doesn't matter. They already did what they're gonna do.
Yeah, art is not a democracy, people.
Right. Okay.
And okay.
So it's really not, and I'm pretty sure like that's why they made that joke about democracy in the show. No.
Yeah. It was a meta joke.
But even though art is not a democracy, what is when we go online and are able to share our opinions, find 50 other people who have our same opinions, and then suddenly we become Daenerys and we think we're right.
Yeah, and you create petitions to like, tell HBO to film a new season.
Right.
Women and children, it all works out.
Right. And I do believe it's hard for anyone to also want to be a part of that, because suddenly you are included. Suddenly you feel like you're talking with other people who understand you. And there's something powerful about that. But I also know that there's something where we can't have nice things anymore. Because all we do is break it down.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. I mean, I have, now that Endgame is had it been out for, I guess, about a month now, you're starting to see that, I don't think to the same extent as Game of Thrones, but there is that element of that out there as well.
Well, something that's disturbed me, and I've noticed this more and more lately, is that there's debates that if art becomes so big to become a cultural movement, people are debating whether or not the audience owns it at that point, not the creator, when it becomes so big to impact culture. And I think that's pretty unnerving that people would claim to own something that someone else created just because it became popular enough.
Yeah, that for some reason that gets under my skin.
Yeah, that's the mentality these people have when they make these petitions. It's no, the writers don't own this, we own this.
Yeah.
And I think also it's because art is so personal. Mm-hmm. Like people who do that, who write a TV show, who produce a TV show, who direct a movie, people who act on screen, who put themselves in that public space, people who make a podcast, people who write online for shows. All you're doing, you're not going out there and thinking to yourself, hey, I want to change the culture. It's more about like, I have something to say, and this is the only way I know how to say it. And rather than get depressed, rather than drinking, taking drugs, doing all of this horrible stuff, they're choosing a much more healthier way to express something that they need to in order to work through any issues they may have. So it's very unnerving to hear that people suddenly claim, well, if you have 2.2 billion people watch this show, suddenly it's ours. What the heck is that? Who cares? Like, go make your own. Go tell your own story.
Yeah, there's definitely. I mean, we've seen this especially with the mega movies like the Endgame and even the Star Wars universe, Game of Thrones, other tentpole franchise shows and movies that are out there. There definitely has seemed to be a more entitlement feeling out there, and obviously anybody with a keyboard and time to kill can like make it into a movement.
Yeah, the level of entitlement is just frightening. I haven't followed along, but I saw earlier today Robert Pattinson is Batman, and there's already petition to get fired. He hasn't even played in the role yet. We don't even know how he's gonna perform, and people want him gone. It's just terrible.
Yeah.
People wanted Heath Ledger gone.
Right.
So I can only assume they're the same exact people. It's just a trend.
Yeah, they just went from release the Snyder cut to like we hate Robert Pattinson as Batman. Yeah.
You have every right to be disappointed. You have every right to voice your opinion, but you do not have the right to get someone fired over that opinion.
And he hasn't even been officially cast yet. I mean, that's the thing.
Oh, it's not even official? Jeez.
Well, I mean, it's also that, like, this is reason, public opinion like this and public outrage is part of the reason why I believe he's, after the Twilight films, was like, you know what? I got paid a lot of money. I can choose my projects now, and I don't want to do the big budget because suddenly you're stalked by paparazzi. Like, I want to have a life. And so, again, this is why we can't have nice things, because I honestly think he would be amazing in that role. And yet I might never get to see it because a bunch of people who are so narrow-minded is like, no, I'm going to start a petition. What the heck? I don't why aren't you petitioning something that matters?
Exactly.
Like, has a real effect on you. Okay?
Go bring some clean water to countries in need of it. How about that?
I just don't understand it. Oh man. But this turned into a very interesting discussion.
Yeah.
But I think it's worth having, and I think a lot of people are having it about it in context of everything that occurred during this last season. And the way we speak about it, it's only 6 weeks, guys. It's not very long even. I don't know. I think maybe my feelings about this series was a bit clouded because I also spent my Sunday very disappointed that Billions didn't release an episode. And that's an amazing show.
Yeah.
Despite the Rush references, I don't watch Billions.
Oh, it's okay. So this is my segment. I always do a pitch about Billions, and it's in its 4 seasons. John Malkovich is on this show. Have I sold you yet?
Not yet. Sorry.
And I just say that because he never does TV shows, and yet he just popped up on this one, and he's pretty good, although he plays basically the same character that he played in Rounders. I just love it so much because when you talk about rushing shows, there is nothing ever rushed about Billions.
Not yet.
Shut up, Lindsay. They are just puppeteers making these characters make snap judgments about one another and putting each other into these weird positions of power where every action has a consequence. Everything you do can be misperceived by another character, and the relationships are so complicated that it is a fascinating web of people who are ego driven, who want power, who want to be successful, and who want money, are all just crisscrossing betrayals and manipulation. And it's really interesting, everything they're able to do with this show and these characters. And they don't like to expand it. Like, that's something we've noticed on some of our other shows, Will, is that often, especially when writers start to get lazy, suddenly you feel like the roster has to just expand by 6 people. Right. And then suddenly there's not enough time to invest in the characters like we watch. Exactly. We want to watch.
Yeah. And when it's expanded to the point, it obviously dilutes the product to the point where it's just like, this is not the show I fell in love with anymore.
Yeah.
That's why I'm so hesitant to invest my time in most shows, because often, like you guys just pointed out, it becomes something different, and then you feel, what have I been watching this entire time? What have I invested in? What does it become?
Yeah. Speaking about shows, investment, and a show that had a very consistent season, Supergirl season 4.
It was start to finish definitely the most consistent show of the Arrowverse was on in the 2018-2019 season. I was I guess I was the small sliver of people who were watching this finale versus Game of Thrones, but as I told you, when I DM'd you, I was like, I felt very satisfied with how they finished the story. Obviously, there's some points where they could have. I wish they had spent a little bit more time on some things, especially with how we had such a fascinating character the first part of the season with Ben Lockwood. I thought his arc was a bit rushed at the end, but at the expense of Lex Luthor. But at the same time, given that Lex was pulling the strings, and I have to give major props to John Cryer. I mean, whenever we saw that Dickie was cast as Lex, I think there was definitely a collective like, is this going to work? And it did. He was, I think, as far as signature portrayals of Lex Luthor, obviously Gene Hackman, Michael Rosenbaum had his version of Smallville, and this version of Lex was by John Cryer. I think definitely stands out in the top three. Because I know we've also had Jamie Eisenberg with Justice Batman v Superman, but nah. John Cryer was a solid Lex Luthor who definitely conveyed that hate of Kryptonians throughout the series, and was a master puppeteer this season. So ultimately getting into the White House, and I know the show, some people didn't like the political slant to the season, but I think with all the things that they covered this season as far as the xenophobia, and yeah, it did touch a little bit on the nose as far as some of the things in the climate today. But I mean, that's to me that what makes a good season, a good story, when you can touch on issues and still yet be entertained. And I thought this season was thoroughly entertaining. So even though his mom had to tell him to back off on the quoting of certain maniacal, homicidal, genocidal maniacs like Hitler, but that was good, because again, it gave the show some heft and weight that the other shows this season, quite frankly, lacked.
Lindsay, do you watch Supergirl?
No, all I know of it is what I've heard you guys talk about. So
okay. For some reason, I felt like I saw a DM where you were like, "Yeah, I'll even watch Supergirl."
Oh no, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's a hard show. I even gave up on the first season, and it took me a while to get back in. I gave up on the third season too. I'm surprised how much I really like season 4. And that's because it feels complete. Something that they did was you initially invest a lot of the arc into Ben Lockwood and building up that character, and then you're told, well, John Cryer is going to come in and play Lex Luthor for just a small arc. I didn't realize how large the arc was.
Yeah.
and it was because like they really wanted to say, no. Leading up to the finale, Lex Luthor has been pulling the strings on everyone the entire time, and we're going to remind you of this and make sure you really understand how much he threaded this quilt of everything that has happened over the last year. And then during the finale, we're going to remind you, Supergirl is the cousin of Superman, and Lex Luthor is arch enemy is Superman. So yes, this may be Supergirl the show, but Lex Luthor, make no mistake, is really out to just kill Superman.
Yeah. And his whole,
which was so, I thought was clever. I do not find it to undermine Supergirl herself, because he does a great setup in making sure next season we get the showdown between Lena and Kara.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You make a good point that it did not undermine Supergirl at all. And I think they did it right by having the threads, we saw him come on, I guess, around shortly after the mid-season hiatus, and he was in a few episodes. He, uses Lena's tech to give himself superpowers after his mother poisoned him so that he would come down with some form of cancer, and he is strengthened, and then he's pretty much, he goes away. But all the while, all the things that he set in motion continue to move forward, and when we get to the climax in the season finale, and to your point, how he just hates Superman and hates Kryptonians, and the betrayal, for example, of the Red Daughter, who was the clone of Kara, and just how she was used by Lex to achieve this end of making Supergirl public enemy number one, and elevating Ben Lockwood from this obscure college professor to this leader of this movement, to basically get him to basically harvest the aliens so that he could power this machine to kill Superman. I mean, that was a very clever bit of storytelling that they did this season.
Yeah. I thought it was very clever. I thought it was very strategic, and it allowed me to not feel like they wasted time in the beginning of this season. Mm-hmm. It felt like it just kept building on one thing after the other.
Yeah.
It felt like it was expanding, as opposed to just saying, oh, you thought we were heading here, we're going to make a major left turn and actually go in this direction, which makes no sense.
Exactly. It really reached a point this season with the Arrowverse where I really got to the place where I was looking forward to Supergirl more so than the other shows, because they really, for the first time, I felt fully invested in this character, whereas before I did not. And in the show, because they just had a very, very solid way of just telling the story and utilizing the head fake with the big bad. Arrow did that to some degree, but I think the writers' rooms for all these shows going forward, and with the new one with Batwoman, which, get into our earlier conversations, another place where people are already like calling it for to be canceled before it even gets on the air. It really gets, I think really shows how you can do a really solid storytelling within the constructs and confines of the CW model. Mm-hmm. And I'm hopeful that the other teams look at what Supergirl accomplished this season as they move forward, especially with the upcoming Crisis and how this whole universe is going to be shaken up because of the Crisis of Infinite Earths crossover.
Yeah, and the Monitor even shows up in this episode at the end and releases John's brother. Mm-hmm. Because the one thing this finale did kind of wear me out on was, you end it with the Lena setup. Also, I mean, because we just got done talking about Thrones, what is with this tendency to let the person who's dying handcuffed just talk and plant all of these ideas? It's like, seriously, guys? And I mean, Daenerys, she gets stabbed, she's out. Lex gets shot twice. He can talk for another 3 minutes.
Yeah.
What the heck? I don't understand it. And so you get that ending, and then you get the worst advice that Alex has ever given Kara. Let's just have her have tonight, Lena has been through a lot. The worst sisterly advice she has ever given, okay?
Yeah, I guess she's still a little foggy, given that her memories of Kara being Supergirl were taken from her, maybe.
Yeah, she's in love. She's not really thinking about Kara right now.
Yeah, that's true.
Her well-being.
She's finally fallen in love again, so happy for her.
Yeah, and then you get the Monitor releasing John's John's brother, who I don't remember him having, but I'm sure they told you in an episode that I didn't watch. But it's significant. And then you get the Monitor confronting Lex. We don't know where it ends. It just ends. That's like, oh, no, I forgot about one. Yes. See, this is how many, like, let's set up season 5. They crammed into this episode, and that's the point where I was just like, what are you doing? What is happening here? There is no, I don't want another ending. I don't want another tease. Like, then they put in the Leviathan. I'm like, Jesus Christ, you guys.
Yeah. That is, they did this typical setup of season 5, and obviously setting up everything for the Crisis. And even though I don't watch Legends of Tomorrow, I'll definitely have to at least watch the setup for Crisis from that show. But
it's like the writers watched Arrow and Flash and were like, well, they ended this season and they teased Crisis. So we have to double what both of those shows did.
Yeah.
It was weird.
Yeah.
Oh man.
But I would have to give this I would have to give this season of Supergirl A- B+, over 4. If you were asking me to give it a grade, it really, I think, had the after the melodrama and everything from last season's ending, it definitely had it managed to survive the Arrowverse curse.
Okay, so first of all, the melodrama, the show got ruined the moment Chris Wood left, okay? Those two have great chemistry, hence why they're engaged to be married in real life, okay? Just saying. I know they ended her first marriage, but still. Also, really, this show is amazing because just find the scene online, but there is a scene in the season where you have Sam Witwer, yes, the Sam Witwer, playing Brainy, playing Lockwood. Enough said, brilliant, should be shown in acting class. Definitely.
Lindsay, you should just check that out, just so you can see what we're talking about.
Okay, that will be on YouTube?
Yeah. Sam Witwer playing Brainy as Lockwood. It's just like, he must have had so much fun that day.
Yeah.
This is perfect. I love it so much. All right. Well, that is it for our ramblings tonight. Thank you very much. Lindsay, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at ApherosXII. It's APHEROSXII.
And she does make all of our beautiful artwork, so be sure to thank her because we sincerely thank you for everything you do for our show.
If you want me to switch out the Daenerys artwork for someone who's not a murderer, just let me know.
That went dark. I didn't think about that.
Oh yeah. I gotta think about our show.
Well, Will, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me at Will M. Polk. That's WILLMPOLK.
And you can find me on Twitter at SJ Belmont. Please follow our crew at CNN Nerd. Friend us on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram. But most importantly, rate, subscribe, and comment on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Spotify. Good night. Geek out. You're welcome.